Chair and honourable members. Pmrc was tasked with looking at maximizing revenue collection from the mining sector, and we are all well aware that in the 2019 budget address, the government of the Republic of Zambia, through the Minister of Finance, Honourable Margaret Mwanakatwe, announced a new mineral royalty tax based on a sliding scale by increasing mineral royalties by 1.5% at all levels, and by introducing a fourth tier at rate 10% for amounts $7,500 and above. Other measures, of course, include making mineral royalty non-deductible for income tax purposes, introduction of import duty at the rate of 5% on copper and cobalt concentrates, export duty on precious metals including gold, precious stones and gemstones at the rate of 15%, lifting the suspension of export duty on manganese ores and concentrates, which was put in place in 2012, and increase this duty, of course, to 15% from 10%. Of course, these measures have been largely welcomed by civil society, including Pmrc, as key efforts towards a more pragmatic and realistic approach that views the mining industry as partners in development and as an effective fiscal regime for the mining sector, given the vast minerals that Zambia is endowed with.
Would you then advocate for different type of taxation depending on the operations and cost structure in Zambia so that it's optimal? That means basically you'd look at Kansanshi, these big mining conglomerates, and say, okay, the cost structure is this, the margins, profit margins are these, and therefore we will charge the mineral royalty tax for this mine in this manner, for this mine in this manner, so that it is more or less equivalent to what is maintained in Peru, because Peru right now is doing quite well.
Of course, like I earlier said, different mines have different costs. I think there are some mines that have relatively higher costs than others, depending on the extraction methods and the depth of the ore and the grade of the ore as well. And I think this brings to bear, I think, the different cost structures. But the issue at hand here that we have is, are the mines transparent enough to open their books completely for government to make a thorough or a proper assessment of their costs? And then secondly, do we have the capacity, I think, to read into most of these financial models that they are using to try and see whether they are really telling us the truth? I think that remains to be seen.
So you wouldn't,
so
you don't go the route of differentiated taxing systems?
If using differentiated tax systems does give us a win-win situation on the balance of probabilities, we are likely to gain more revenue, then that would be the route to take. But of course, this starts with a dialogue process. That should be the starting point. And the mines should just be open enough to show government, to demonstrate to government their financial costs, and government must have the capacity, I think, to analyze this information and be able to tell what is true and what is not. We've had in the past situations where ZRA has come up with assessments which have been disputed by the mines on tax revenues.
The first point there, you're recommending that the government should consult with industries in order to assess the impacts that changes to the royalty system will have on the mineral sector. I just wanted to find out from yourselves, at what stage should the consultations be, especially when you are doing your budget announcements? Should that be done before the budget or after? I'm asking this because you find, even after the budget pronouncements, a lot of outcries, especially from the mining industry. So as visitors, what is the best, and what is the best state of engagement?
Okay. I think the best time of engagement is before, but what we have seen is that sometimes it's difficult for government to accommodate all the different players because they all have special needs. We have got small scale miners with the larger mines and all those in the medium scale. So the engagements usually, I think they focus on those larger mines, and sometimes you find that those that are below the medium ones will tend to be affected because the policies that will be formulated will affect much more the higher mines than the smaller ones. As a result, you find that the moment the budget is passed, the ones that usually come up with complaints are those medium scale mines, which say we depend on the larger KCM and FQM for our production. So sometimes that has happened. And also I think we haven't done much to engage the mines in terms of especially the financial reporting, because at some point ZRA's office was only in Lusaka and was not here in the Copper Belt, but it was the one in charge of mines until I think members of society said we can't be coming to Lusaka to actually go and report what the mines are doing. That's when ZRA moved the office to Copper Belt. Then when ZRA reported, the mines disputed, and that's why Mr. Aga said capacity, if we don't have capacity in terms of how they report, it would be difficult for us to really know how much they are making and how much their costs are, because sometimes on paper they would write that they are bringing so much investments and their profits are so much, but in reality, if they use different valuations, we will not be able as a country to know that, and it's been proven by ZRA, and that's why now they're saying ZRA needs much more capacity. So I think that's why there's a challenge in terms of engagement. Also, some of it is in the development agreements which were agreed, because some of them covered the mines for 10, 15 years. And the mines are saying we can't change because we were promised, and those development agreements haven't been put in the public.
Is the Treasury shooting in the dark with these new tax measures? Could it come through?
I think to answer that quickly, that is just one of the measures that government is taking to go into this route. But then the whole issue here, from the Pmrc's perspective, is sitting around the submission that we made on maximizing social benefits. If we can come back, like Mr. Kanga said, and have an in-dialogue between government and mine owners, and then also stimulate systems that are transparent, that will work in the benefit of government and also on the benefit of the general public, in knowing that our revenue are being collected. Because it's one thing to say mines are not really remitting all revenues or the mineral, the royalties. That's one thing. And then it's another thing also to exactly know that the returns are actually there in government. So there are two things here. Is it our systems that are not strengthened enough, that are not transparent enough, or also on the other hand, is it the mines themselves that are doing hide and seek? So these systems must be both on the government side and then also in the mines itself through ZRA, the strengthening of ZRA as well. Speaking into devolution and decentralization, should be able to have consortiums that will ask the people whenever a mine has gone or a company has gone into a setup to say what are the benefits here for the people, for the community. What is it that the community is going to maximize from that mine before we can even talk about government returns that we're discussing here.